The silent contract, 3 years of marriage, and Emily Carter had never shared a bed with her husband. She had never shared dreams with him either, and barely even shared words. This wasn't the story of a romance that bloomed overnight. It was the story of a woman who wore a wedding ring like armor, and a man who only realized what he had when it was almost too late. The mansion breathed in silence, an elegant, suffocating kind of silence that stretched across the marble floors like a second skin. Emily rose at 5:30 each morning, just as she had for the past 1,095 mornings. Her body, accustomed to the rhythm of a life without color, moved on its own. Quiet steps to the bathroom, a splash of cold water, moisturizer, a muted gray robe. Everything in her world had become predictable, and with predictability came invisibility. She remembered the weight of the pen in her hand that day, heavier than the diamond ring they later slid onto her finger. The air in Olivia Blackwood's office had smelled of eucalyptus and power. The walls were lined with abstract art and business degrees, as if love had no place in the arrangement about to be sealed. At 26, Emily had agreed to marry Nathan Blackwood, Boston's most calculated billionaire heir, not for love, but to keep her family legacy alive. Carter Constructions, the pride of her grandfather and the work of her father's life, was collapsing under the weight of the 2008 financial crisis. Her father's refusal to bribe, lie, or cut moral corners had earned him integrity in bankruptcy. Emily's mother, Laura, was the one who orchestrated the deal. Proud but cornered, she had gone to the Blackwoods with a proposition: save our company, and you can have our daughter. The Blackwoods, of course, didn't deal in sentiment. Olivia saw potential not in romance but in optics. A union with a respected but fallen family had the charm of old money and the strategy of chess. Nathan didn't object. He didn't smile either. He had simply extended his hand and said, "Let's keep it clean." That was Nathan, cold, impeccably dressed, brilliant in boardrooms, and absent everywhere else. Emily had entered that marriage with her back straight and her heart tucked away like a childhood toy she didn't need anymore. The mansion she moved into was a fortress of marble, glass, and echoes. Her bedroom, located on the east side, overlooked a rose garden she never visited. Nathan's quarters were in the west wing, separated by glass corridors, abstract silence, and emotional miles. They didn't fight. They didn't flirt. They existed. Every morning she prepared coffee the way Nathan liked it. 2 sugars, no cream. Strong and silent, just like him. She placed the cup on the counter by the door he used every morning. Sometimes he took it, sometimes he didn't. But he never said thank you. Not out of cruelty, she believed, but because he didn't think of her as someone to thank. She was part of the architecture, a fixture, a function. The contract had been clear: separate rooms, separate lives, shared obligations, public appearances. When needed, no expectations of affection. Nathan, true to his word, had never crossed that line. Sometimes she wondered if he even noticed her anymore. He didn't ask about her day. He never asked about her dreams, but she noticed him. She noticed the tightness in his jaw whenever he returned from meetings with his father. She noticed the tension in his shoulders when he thought no one was watching. She noticed how he avoided the music room where she played piano some nights, her melodies soft and aching. There were layers to Nathan. She could feel them. But he had locked them away so tightly, she no longer knew if she wanted the key. One evening he knocked. That alone was strange. It never knocked. Not in 3 years. She opened the door in her cardigan and reading glasses, halfway through a novel she wasn't enjoying. Nathan stood there in a black button-down, no tie. His hair slightly tousled like he'd run his hands through it one too many times. He cleared his throat. "I have a formal event next Friday, the Eastgate Club annual gala." She blinked. "Okay. I'd like you to accompany me," he added, eyes not quite meeting hers. "You'd like me to," she repeated. His expression didn't change, but something in the air shifted, a crack in the concrete. Yes, you. That was it. No explanation, no apology. For 3 years of invisibility, it's just a quiet request. Emily nodded slowly, not because she owed him, but because something about his voice, about the way he lingered, felt unfinished. And as he turned and walked away, Emily stood in the doorway, heart oddly alert. For the first time in 3 years, she wasn't just a shadow in that house. But what did this change really mean? The weight of collapse before the mansion, before the ring, before Nathan Blackwood ever uttered her name, there was collapse. Quiet at first, then merciless. Carter Constructions, once a pillar of Boston's architectural pride, had been founded by Emily's grandfather, a man of blueprints and honor. He had built bridges, schools, and cathedrals, not just with concrete, but with principle. And that principle was passed on to Emily's father, Richard Carter, a man who refused shortcuts, bribes, or manipulation. A man who believed that integrity was the true foundation of any legacy. But integrity had no value on Wall Street. When the 2008 financial crash hit, it was as if someone had pulled a thread from the seam of their lives and everything unraveled. Projects were canceled. Credit lines vanished. Contractors stopped answering calls. Clients disappeared. What was once a thriving company became a leaking ship in a storm with no harbor in sight. Emily remembered the shift in her home like one remembers a sudden winter. The phone rang less. Her father spoke less. Her mother cried more. Laura Carter, always composed, always elegant, began drinking tea in silence rather than reading the paper. She stopped buying fresh flowers for the kitchen. She let go of the maid with an apology that sounded more like shame. They sold the lake house. First, then the ski cabin, then the city apartment Emily had dreamed of living in after graduation. What remained was their family home and a mountain of debt. Emily, fresh out of architecture school, tried everything to help. She offered to work without pay for the firm, volunteered to find new investors, even considered moving abroad. But her father would shake his head every time and say, "You shouldn't have to clean up a mess you didn't make." But messes, she learned, didn't care who caused them. They simply demanded payment. The worst night came when she found her mother sitting in the dark, clutching a foreclosure notice. Her usually sharp eyes were soft with surrender. "It's all gone, Emily," she had whispered. "Everything your grandfather built, your father can't face it. He's breaking, and I don't know how to stop it." That night, the family legacy didn't die with thunder. It died in a whisper, in the way her mother's hand trembled while holding a piece of paper. But Laura Carter wasn't a woman who accepted defeat. Not entirely. A week later, she dressed in her finest navy dress, tied her hair into a sleek chignon, and told Emily she had a meeting with someone who understands the weight of legacy. That someone was Olivia Blackwood, a matriarch with a reputation for elegance, ambition, and steel beneath her pearls. The Blackwoods had built their empire on precision and power. They didn't suffer sentiment. They acquired influence like art collectors, strategically and always for display. Laura returned from that meeting with a face unreadable, but her hands were tight around the leather strap of her purse. "They made an offer," she said. Emily didn't understand. What kind of offer? Laura took a long breath, sat across from her daughter, and laid the truth on the table with the calm of someone slicing through her own heart. A marriage. Emily froze. To who? Nathan Blackwood? Emily blinked. The heir. Mother nodded. "It would be beneficial to both families. They'll erase our debts. Your father won't lose his name. You won't lose your future. And they'll gain the appearance of tradition, of old Boston loyalty. It's strategic." Emily stood, disoriented. "So I'd be a pawn. You'd be a bridge," her mother said. A bridge between ruin and reinvention. The idea was repulsive. And yet, beneath the revulsion, Emily saw something else. The image of her father, hunched over his desk at night, crying when he thought no one could hear. Her mother folding and unfolding letters from creditors. The dusty family photographs, the empty dining room, the echoes of a past that was slipping away. What could she do? Say no and watch everything fall? Say yes and sacrifice the only thing? She had left herself. Emily didn't answer right away. She spent 3 days walking the streets of Boston, past buildings her family had designed, benches they had donated, plaques with her grandfather's name. Everything that had once felt solid now felt like paper in the rain. On the fourth morning, she walked into Olivia Blackwood's office. The room smelled of eucalyptus and strategy. Nathan was there, cold, beautiful, distant, a man in a gray suit and a darker expression. He looked at her and didn't blink. "We both know what this is." Emily nodded. "I do." The contract was drawn up. It was not romantic. It was efficient. Separate bedrooms, separate lives, public appearances when needed. 8. No expectations of emotional involvement. Full financial clearance of Carta Construction's debts, privacy protected, freedom respected. The wedding would happen in 30 days. A private ceremony, no press, no fanfare, just signatures and champagne. Her father never knew the terms. He simply knew his company had been saved and that his daughter had agreed to marry a good man from a good family. He cried at the altar. Emily did not. She wore ivory. Nathan wore black. They said their vows like they were reading lines from a script neither of them had written. He didn't kiss her. She didn't expect him to. Afterward, there was a small dinner. With both families, toasts were made. Smiles were exchanged. Emily looked across the table at Nathan and wondered what kind of man marries a woman he doesn't even try to know. But then she realized she was marrying him too, and she hadn't asked a single question either. They left the reception in separate cars. She arrived at the mansion to find her bags already unpacked. Her bedroom had a view of the roses. His bedroom had a locked door, so it began. The beginning of a marriage that wasn't, a partnership without warmth, an alliance dressed in elegance but devoid of intimacy. But somewhere in the silence of that house, and the quiet ache of what she gave up, Emily held on to one fragile thought, that maybe, just maybe, sacrifice wasn't the end of her story. It was only the beginning. The awakening the days following Nathan's invitation felt different, charged with an energy Emily couldn't quite name. She found herself paying attention to things she had long ignored, the way morning light filtered through the east wing windows, the sound of Nathan's footsteps in the hallway, the small changes in his routine that she had memorized without meaning to. It was during one of these ordinary mornings that she discovered something extraordinary. While organizing the guest room closets, she stumbled upon her old sketchbooks, hidden beneath a dusty cashmere blanket. There, in graphite and watercolors, was her 17-year-old dream, a lakeside eco-resort with solar panels camouflaged among greenery. Rooms shaped like leaves, architecture that breathed. Tears stung her eyes before she realized they were. Even there, that version of herself had believed in possibility, in impact, in love that didn't arrive through contracts or negotiations. She ran her fingers over the worn pages and whispered to herself, "I used to be someone." That night, she placed the sketchbook under her pillow, not because she believed in fairy tales, but because she missed herself. The week passed in a blur of quiet preparation. Emily chose her dress, carefully deep emerald silk, that kissed her skin and revealed the delicate strength of her collarbones. She pinned her hair into soft waves, framing her face with elegance. Her makeup was subtle, just enough to highlight, not hide. Around her wrist, she wore her grandmother's gold bracelet, the only heirloom she had salvaged from the chaos. When Friday evening arrived, Emily stepped out of her bedroom and felt the entire mansion pause. Even the staff, accustomed to her quiet presence, glanced up. And Nathan, standing by the staircase, adjusting his cufflinks, wearing a black tuxedo that fit him like a second skin, looked at her, truly looked. His eyes met hers and didn't flicker away. For once, he didn't nod, or he didn't look through her. He stared. "You look," he began, but the sentence hung unfinished in the air between them. Emily tilted her head, a soft smile touching her lips. "Different." He nodded once, stunning. It wasn't a compliment thrown like currency. It was quiet, honest, and that made it disarm her more than flattery ever could. The Eastgate Club was a place of legacy, its walls whispering of old money, its polished influence, and whispered arrangements between families that had ruled Boston for over a century. Invitations to its annual gala were not simply extended. They were bestowed, and only to those whose names carried weight beyond their fortunes. Emily had never been invited before, not until now. As they entered the ballroom, heads turned, not because of her last name or the man beside her, but because of her. The way she walked into the room with grace, not submission. The way she carried herself like a woman who remembered who she was. Nathan introduced her to the circle of partners and dignitaries using words he had never spoken before. "This is Emily, my wife." The phrase rolled off his tongue awkwardly, as if it had collected dust over the years. But there it was, in public, out loud. She was no longer a rumor. She was visible. "Pleasure," she said softly, extending her hand with confidence. The women assessed her with the silent cruelty that only high society mastered, scanning her dress, her ring, her posture. But Emily didn't shrink. She had grown up around powerful women and knew their games. She played none of them. Instead, she charmed them with subtle wit and a grounded presence. When someone asked about her work, she didn't lie or play dumb. "I studied architecture and I still sketch. It's mostly sustainable design." That's when someone new joined the circle. A man in his mid-30s with warm eyes and a charming smile. "Architecture," he said, intrigued. "That's rare at this kind of event." Emily smiled. "So is sincerity." He laughed, and something in Nathan shifted beside her. Ethan Walker was the founder of a clean energy startup that had been making waves. Charismatic, curious, and refreshingly genuine, he asked Emily about her ideas as if they mattered. He didn't just hear her, he listened. And in return, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: relevance. Nathan watched in silence, his jaw tight, his glass barely touched. For the first time in their carefully constructed marriage, Nathan was witnessing Emily come alive. Not for him, not for appearances, but for herself, and it unsettled him. Later that evening, as they stood near the balcony overlooking the Charles River, Nathan approached her. "You handled yourself well," he said. "I wasn't performing." She replied, her tone light but deliberate. "I didn't say you were." They stood in silence for a moment, the city lights flickering in the distance. "You never told me," Nathan said finally. "Told you what? That you were an architect? That you had dreams?" Emily turned to face him, and for the first time in 3 years she saw something in his eyes that wasn't calculation or distance. It was curiosity, maybe even regret. "You never asked?" she said simply. The weight of that truth settled between them like a stone dropped in still water. Nathan's carefully constructed walls, built over years of emotional distance, began to show their first cracks. "I should have," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. In that moment, standing on the balcony with the city spread below, then Emily realized that the man she had married wasn't entirely the man she had been living with. There were depths to Nathan that he had hidden not just from her, but perhaps from himself. As they drove home in comfortable silence, Emily felt something she hadn't experienced in years: hope. Not the desperate kind that clings to impossibility, but the quiet kind that whispers of new beginnings. The marriage contract might have been about strategy and survival, but perhaps it didn't have to stay that way. Perhaps in the spaces between what was written and what was possible, something real could grow. Perhaps it was time to stop being strangers in the same house and start being something more. The turning point the days after the gala felt like the aftermath of a storm that had rearranged the landscape of their marriage. Nathan began appearing at breakfast, something he hadn't done in months. He would sit across from Emily at the long dining table, coffee in hand, and they would share the kind of silence that felt less like absence and more like presence. "Your coffee," he said one morning, gesturing to the cup she had placed by his usual door. "It's perfect every time." Emily looked up from her book, surprised. "You noticed?" "I've always noticed," he replied, and something in his tone suggested he was talking about more than coffee. The conversation was small, fragile, but it was a beginning. Emily began to see glimpses of the man beneath the calculated exterior. The way he unconsciously loosened his tie when he was thinking, how he paused at the doorway of the music room when she played piano, the subtle smile that touched his lips when he thought no one was watching. But it was the arrival of flowers that changed everything. Emily was in the garden room, sketching ideas for a sustainable housing project she had been working on privately. When the housekeeper brought in an elaborate arrangement of white roses and eucalyptus, it's expensive, professionally arranged, beautiful, in their perfection, for Mrs. Blackwood, the housekeeper said, setting them on the side table. Emily opened the card, expecting the usual corporate formality. Instead, she found elegant handwriting. Your passion for architecture inspired me. I'd love to discuss your eco-resort concept over dinner. Perhaps we could change the world together. One building at a time, Ethan. Her heart fluttered, not entirely from the compliment, but from the recognition of her work, her dreams, her potential. It had been so long since someone had seen her as more than an ornament or an obligation. She was still holding the card when Nathan appeared in the doorway. His eyes moved from the flowers to the card in her hand, and his expression shifted. From curiosity to something darker? Admirer, he asked, his voice carefully neutral. Emily folded the card, uncertain why she felt caught. A colleague from the other night. He's interested in my architectural work. Ethan Walker. It wasn't a question. Nathan stepped into the room, his presence filling the space in a way that made Emily's pulse quicken. You knew? I make it? My business to know who my wife talks to at public events. His voice was steady, but Emily caught the slight emphasis on my wife. Your wife, Emily repeated, setting down her pencil. That's interesting. 3 years, and you're just now remembering. You have one. Nathan's jaw tightened. Emily, no. Let me finish. She stood, facing him across the room. For 3 years I've been invisible in this house. I've made your coffee, attended your events when requested, and asked for nothing in return. Now someone shows interest in my work, in my dreams, and suddenly I'm worth protecting? It's not like that. Then what is it like, Nathan? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you only value something when someone else wants it. The words hung between them like a challenge. Nathan took a step closer, and Emily could see the conflict in his iced battle between the man he had trained himself to be and the man he might have been. You're right, he said finally. I've been a fool. The admission stunned her.
Nathan.
Blackwood didn't apologize. He didn't admit weakness. I married you for strategy, he continued, his voice growing stronger. I told myself it was business, that emotions were a liability. But watching you with him, seeing the way, you came alive when someone actually listened to you, I realized. I've been the biggest fool in Boston. Emily felt her defenses wavering. Nathan, I know I have no right to ask this after 3 years of treating you like a stranger, but don't have dinner with him. Have dinner with me instead. Let me be the one who listens to your dreams. Vulnerability in his voice was so unexpected, so genuine, that Emily found herself speechless. This was the man she had glimpsed in rare moments but never truly. Sthingth man beneath the armor of business suits and calculated distance. One dinner, she said finally. But not because you're jealous or threatened, because I want to know who. Nathan Blackwood really is when he's not performing for boardrooms or society pages. That evening, they didn't eat in the formal dining room. Instead, Nathan led her to the kitchen, where he proceeded to make pasta with a competence that surprised her. He had rolled up his sleeves, loosened his tie, and for the first time in their marriage, he looked like a man instead of a business. Transaction, you cook, Emily observed, settling onto a stool at the kitchen island. My grandmother taught me before she died. She said a man who couldn't feed himself was at the mercy of others. He paused, glancing at her. I haven't cooked for anyone in years. Why tonight? Nathan stopped stirring and looked at her directly, because I want to be the kind of man who deserves someone like you. And I'm tired of being afraid of what? That might mean... Over dinner, Nathan told her about his grandmother, about the music room he avoided because it reminded him of her, about the pressure from his father to be perfect, untouchable, strategic in all things. Emily found herself sharing stories of her grandfather's blueprints, her father's integrity, her mother's quiet strength. For the first time in 3 years, they talked not as strangers fulfilling a contract, but as two people discovering they might actually like each other. I want to see your sketches, Nathan said as they finished eating. The real ones, not just the resort, but everything. Emily hesitated. Her sketches were private, vulnerable, the place where she kept her truest self. But looking at Nathan across the table, seeing the genuine interest in his eyes. She realized that vulnerability might be exactly what their marriage needed. "Okay," she said. "But fair warning, they're full of impossible dreams." Nathan reached across the table and took her hand, the first time he had touched her voluntarily in 3 years. "I think I might be ready for some impossible dreams." As they sat in the kitchen surrounded by the warm glow of possibilities, Emily realized that sometimes the most profound changes happen not in grand gestures, but in the quiet decision to stop being strangers and start being real. The beginning of Us 6 months later, Emily woke to the sound of piano music drifting through the mansion's halls. Not her pianosha recognized the difference in touch, the slightly heavier hand on the keys. Nathan was in the music room, playing a piece she didn't recognize but found achingly beautiful. She wrapped herself in a robe and padded barefoot toward the sound, pausing in the doorway to watch him. His hair was tousled from sleep, his shoulders relaxed in a way she had never seen during their first 3 years of marriage. He was playing from memory, his eyes closed, lost in the music. "My grandmother's favorite," he said without opening his eyes, somehow sensing her presence. She used to say, music was the only language that couldn't lie. Emily stepped into the room, the morning light casting golden patterns across the floor. "It's beautiful. She taught me when I was 12. I stopped playing when she died." He opened his eyes, meeting hers. "I think I was afraid of missing her too much. And now—" Nathan's fingers stilled on the keys. "Now I think missing people we love is just proof we were lucky enough to love them." Emily moved to sit beside him on the piano bench, close enough that their shoulders touched. It was an intimacy that would have been impossible 6 months ago, when they were still strangers, sleeping in separate wings, but now it felt natural, necessary. "Play something else," she said softly. Instead of answering, Nathan began the opening notes of a piece Emily knew well. She joined in, their 4 hands creating a harmony that seemed to fill not just the room but the entire house. The music wrapped around them like a promise, complex and beautiful and utterly right. When the piece ended, they sat in comfortable silence, the echo of the last notes lingering in the air. "I have something for you," Nathan said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small velvet box. Emily's heart skipped, but when he opened it, she found not a ring Butan antique brass key, worn smooth with age. "It's to the lighthouse," he explained. "The one on Martha's Vineyard. It's been in my family for generations, but no one's used it in years. I thought maybe you'd like to design something there, your eco-resort, or whatever you dream of building." Emily stared at the key, overwhelmed. "Nathan, I can't accept this." "You can, you should. It's not a gift, Emily, it's an investment. In your dreams, in your talent, in us." He closed her fingers around the key. "Build something beautiful there. Build something that matters." Tears blurred her vision. "I don't know what to say. Say you'll let me help. Say you'll let me be part of your impossible dreams." "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it." Nathan cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had spilled over. "I love you," he said, the words carrying the weight of months of discovery, of walls torn down and hearts opened. "I think I've been falling in love with you since that night at the gala, watching you become yourself again." "I love you too," Emily replied, and meant it with a ferocity that surprised her. The real you, not the version you thought you had to be. When he kissed her, it was nothing like the perfunctory peck at their wedding ceremony. This was a kiss full of promise and possibility, of 3 years of distance, finally bridged by understanding and choice. They spent the weekend at the lighthouse, walking the rocky shore and talking about the future. Emily sketched plans for a sustainable retreat center while Nathan made notes about renewable energy systems and environmental impact studies. They worked side by side, their separate visions merging into something neither could have imagined alone. "What would you have done?" Emily asked one evening as they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "If I had said yes to Ethan's dinner invitation." Nathan was quiet for a long moment. "I would have respected your choice," he said finally. "But I also would have fought for you, for us. For the first time in my life, I would have fought for something that mattered more than strategy or success." "You wouldn't have had to fight," Emily said, turning to face him. I chose you, Nathan. Not because of a contract or obligation, but because I chose you. Even after 3 years of my stupidity, especially after 3 years of your stupidity, it means you can change, grow, and become better. That's more valuable than perfection. They moved into the same bedroom when they returned to Boston, not because the contract required it, but because they wanted to. Emily's sketches began appearing on Nathan's desk, and his business calls sometimes included questions about sustainable building practices. They had dinner together every night, cooked together on weekends, and filled the mansion with the kind of warmth that made the marble floors feel less like stone and more like home. The construction of the Martha's Vineyard Retreat Center began. In the spring, with Emily as the lead architect and Nathan handling the business side, it was their first project together, but Emily suspected it wouldn't be their last. On their 4th wedding anniversary, they held a celebration that was nothing like their first wedding. This time, there were flowers Emily had chosen, music Nathan had selected, and vows they had written themselves. Their families were there, but so were friends, colleagues, and the entire construction crew from the retreat center. 4 years ago, we promised to honor a contract, Nathan said in his toast. Today, we celebrate choosing each other, every day, in all the ways that matter. Emily raised her glass, her heart full of possibilities, to beginnings disguised as endings, and to love that's patient enough to wait for the right moment to bloom. As the evening wound down and their guests departed, Emily and Nathan found themselves alone in the garden, where she had once walked invisible and ignored. Now, she walked hand in hand with her husband, their wedding rings catching the moonlight. "Any regrets?" Nathan asked, echoing a question he had posed on their first anniversary when they were still strangers. Emily considered the question seriously. She thought about the dreams she had sacrificed, the years of silence, the woman she had almost lost to invisibility. Then she thought about the lighthouse key in her jewelry box. The architectural plans spread across their shared desk. The way. Nathan looked at her now like she was the most important person in his world. "None," she said finally. "Every choice led us here, even the painful ones, even the lonely ones. They all led us to this moment, to this love, to this life we're building together." Nathan stopped walking and pulled her into his arms. "I love you, Emily Carter Blackwood, not because I have to, but because I choose to. Every day, I choose you." "And I choose you," she replied, standing on her toes to kiss him under the stars. "Every day, I choose us." In the distance, the lighthouse beams swept across the water, a beacon of hope and possibility. Emily smiled, thinking of the retreat center that would soon welcome visitors seeking their own new beginnings. Some stories, she reflected, don't begin with love. But the best ones always end with it, and the very best ones understand that endings are just beginnings in disguise. The end asterisk. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. For more heart-touching tales, wishing you a beautiful day now.